Welcome to Alabama Justice Lawyering Up. My name is Richard Jaffe, the senior partner in the Birmingham, Alabama law firm of Jaffe Hanle, Whisonant, and Knight. We are going to explore with you the hottest cases, the most controversial topics of Alabama justice, and we're going to bring to you exciting key players that make our Alabama justice work or not work. We look forward to having you. Welcome to another exciting show for Alabama justice. I'm Richard Jaffe from the law firm of Jaffe Hanle, Whisonant, and Knight. And today we've got as our special guest Deegan Malone, a licensed professional counselor with a concentration in her practice with problematic sexual problems or issues. So Deegan, welcome and thank you for being here.
Absolutely, Richard. I'm honored to be sitting with you today.
Well, let's talk a little, thank you. Let's talk a little bit about what a licensed professional counselor really is and does.
A licensed professional counselor is someone that's certified to practice and independently as a therapist or a counselor. You have to go through a bunch of hoops to get that. I'm licensed by the ABEC board, which is Alabama Board of Examination and Counselors here in Alabama.
And how long have you been practicing and where do you mostly practice?
Well, you're going to help me tell my age now. Been a practicing counselor or a therapist since 1991, Richard. As far as my practice goes, it pretty much blankets the state of Alabama, but concentration mainly on Montgomery to Huntsville, Madison County. I service about 24 DHR counties in some way, shape, or form, whether I do individual counseling or assessments.
And you serve as an expert in many cases that show up in the courthouses across the state.
Correct. Those that are related to a sexual crime or a sexual allegation. Yes, sir.
And how do you keep your credibility, which I understand and personally have experienced is so high? How do you do that?
I think integrity and respecting others. I think one of the things I learned a long time ago from my mother was that you are who you say you are. I take pride in that I'm not a gun for hire. You're not going to get the answer you want because you have the means to provide that answer. Whoever calls, I assist them. I'm a big advocate for whoever calls, whether it's the prosecution or the defense, whether it's domestic relations courts, juvenile, federal, or criminal courts here across the state.
And I've noticed myself in the cases we've worked on together that when you walk into that courtroom, those judges not only know you, but want to hear from you and truly listen to you.
Probably right on some levels, and that may be because I'm the only one that does what I do in such a variety of ways. But again, I think it goes back to my integrity and my stance of factual information that's given in layman's terms that people can interpret and understand what I'm disseminating as far as my message goes for whatever client I'm dealing with.
What are the areas of the law that you work in addition to your private practice of counseling?
The areas of law that I kind of get immersed in is just the Sorna Law, Article 13s, those laws that are attached to any sex crimes.
So the SORNA would be a sexual registration laws?
Correct, yes.
But you work with juveniles?
I do, so you have to look at the SORNA law that applies to them. You have to be able to manage and understand the Article 13s and what their guidelines are and what the individual may face. As far as a lifetime registered sex offender or a 10-year registered sex offender or getting youthful status.
What is Article 13?
Article 13 are the definitions in which we are guided when someone gets accused of a sex crime, whether it be sodomy in the first, electronic solicitation of a child, child pornography, distribution, possession, manufacturing.
One of the things that I've always been concerned about as a citizen and of course as an attorney is that in some cases a juvenile who has been adjudicated as a sexual offender, even if it's some kind of inappropriate touching of another juvenile.
Correct.
That this person, this juvenile, might be 16, 17, has to, in some cases, register as a sex offender for the rest of that person's life.
It depends on the age and the volatility, the nature of the crime. Usually, a juvenile will get the 10-year status. Many of my youthful offenders under the age of 21 hopefully get that 10-year status. Unfortunately, the way the law reads, if you're 16 or 17 and you are involved in a heinous sexual crime against a child or another individual, then you're looking at the 25 years registration or life. And I feel like the 25-year registration is life, really.
It practically is.
Yes.
Because by then, what are the options left for that person?
Not many, because as a registered sex offender for life, you have to check in 3 times a year. You have to let people know where you're living, where you're working. You can't just leave and go somewhere more than 3 days without having whatever municipality you're going to understand where you are.
And most viewers probably would look at this situation and say, well, if somebody, even a juvenile, has been adjudicated as being a sex offender, that they probably should register for life, or 25 years. And I can understand that sentiment, but the truth of the matter is, and I'll ask you this, is that hasn't there been scientific research that when it comes to a juvenile, the brain really hasn't fully developed until between the ages of, say, 18 and 25?
I think there's a lot to be said about that. I think there's environmental factors that go into juvenile sex offenders. I definitely think how our youth today is just saturated with sexual content and materials. And I don't think parents realize what at an early age kids are subjected to, because we don't manage the tablets, we don't manage phones, we don't manage the technology in which our kids are being just inundated with. So I think there's a lot of factors that go into that. But as far as juvenile offenders goes, in any sex charge, people automatically assume guilt.
Oh, yeah.
And my approach to it is somewhere in the middle is the truth, and it's not always what's on paper.
Well, where I was headed a moment ago was this, that the science seems to suggest, at least what I've seen, is that because a juvenile's brain is not fully developed, especially the frontal lobes, the areas where we make decisions, that many of these juveniles that might have done something inappropriate can be rehabilitated. They can be more or less, they can learn appropriate behaviors. They won't always necessarily deviate in that manner.
Correct. But we also have to take into account, we can talk about executive functioning, which starts around 12 or 13 years of age during pubescence, but we also need to look at that child's trauma. What has happened to that male or female juvenile offender that has acted out in a sexual way? What is their core? And I would say probably 95 to 98% of my clients that are juveniles, male and female, that have acted out have had some type of horrific sexual assault, misuse, or abuse in their past before the age of 18. I mean, stats show 1 in 4 girls before the age of 18 have been sexually misused, assaulted, or abused, and 1 in 6 boys, if you're looking at the stats across the country.
So if you're looking at someone who is inappropriately a juvenile, that's sexually related to another person, Are there programs that the offender can go through that might facilitate rehabilitation?
We have 3 different facilities here in the state of Alabama. I'm not going to mention those, but there are, and they're quite costly. The other alternative is if a delinquent youth is convicted, then he will go to Mount Meigs and their specific dormitory or specific campus that deals with the sex offender. The problematic issue here is I've got a lot of female offenders that are juveniles, and there's really limited beds, there's limited places that they can go that will address that. But as far as rehabilitation goes, I'm all about the rehabilitation with therapy, adjunctive medicines, those things that are going to allow extinguishing those unhealthy attitudes and beliefs about their choices.
Let's broaden the discussion for a moment and consider both juveniles and adults. If a juvenile or adult is accused of a sexual offense, do you do any testing?
I do.
That could enlighten or shed light on the proclivity of that person for having sexual tendencies that are inappropriate?
Yes.
What are some of those tests?
One of the tests that I do is called the ABEL, A-B-E-L. It is an instrument that was designed back in the mid-70s, mid-70s, early 80s by Gene Abel, who runs an institute in Atlanta that deals with problematic sexual issues. I use that computer program to assist me in not finding guilt or innocence on a person, but just look at what their sexual interest is based on their input in the computer system, in the instrument that I'm using.
Well, I know that we have retained you to conduct an ABEL test on a number of our clients.
Yes.
The question I have for you is are the results of an ABEL test receptive to the courts or admissible in court?
Yes. But usually I have to sit through a Daubert hearing.
What is a Daubert hearing?
That's kind of offset of a Fry hearing. Daubert is there scientific data that proves that this is usable, that this is meaningful in what we're searching for? And I've been in several Dauberts, and my track record right now, unfortunately, is 6 me, 1 court, where I've passed 6 Dauberts, where it was recognized as a reliable instrument. And
that's pretty
one
impressive.
I haven't. So I've been told.
That's extremely impressive. And just for the viewers who aren't familiar with Daubert, basically, if a lawyer gives the other side notice they want to use the test, and then the other side has a right to file a motion to keep the test out, and then there's a hearing called a Daubert hearing, so the judge decides whether it's scientifically reliable, basically.
Correct.
Well, that's impressive. That's extremely impressive to get those testing in. A lot of lawyers, in fact, don't even know that it's admissible.
Yeah, the first one I ever did was up in Lauderdale County, and I remember calling an attorney saying, "Hey, what's a Daubert?" I had no idea. And he said, "Deegan, you're not going to win this one."
And you did.
Absolutely.
And you've worked with my friend John Mays in Decatur several times, haven't you?
I have. John's a brilliant attorney, and he definitely has paved the way for a lot of case law and sex crimes. And so it's always been a pleasure to be in the room with John Mays, as yourself.
Thank you. Vice versa. Let me ask you this. You touched on it earlier. Why is sexual misconduct, inappropriate sexual behavior, so prevalent in our society? And I'll tell you what, before you answer, let's go to a break and because I think that's a fascinating subject. So we'll go to a break right now, and we'll be right back with our special guest, Deegan Malone. Stay with us. My name is Richard Jaffe of the law firm of Jaffe Hanle, Whisonant and Knight, Birmingham, Alabama. With me is one of my partners, Brett Knight, and I'm going to ask Mr. Knight a question about how you can protect your record if you're arrested and ultimately win your case. Brett, tell the audience what an expungement is.
So an expungement is basically you're filing a petition with the court where you have actually been arrested, and there are certain requirements that have to be in place, but if you were successful in the petition, you will have your arrest and the charge expunged, sealed from your record. This can be beneficial for both employment and school purposes. Now, not everybody is eligible for an expungement. Most misdemeanors, almost all misdemeanors are. Some felonies can't have an act of violence involved in them, but it can be very beneficial for anybody to actually go through this process, and it's something we do on a fairly routine basis with our firm. We make sure that in our cases where we're actually representing our clients throughout the criminal charges, we make sure they get them in the best situation possible so their cases can be expunged as soon as possible and they can go back on with their lives without having to worry about school or employment or this affecting their school or employment objectives. We have seen this help out tons of people because they don't have to worry about putting it on an actual an application, because basically what the expungement process does is it actually seals the record. On a background check, nobody will actually see the arrest or the charge, and especially when it comes to school transcripts or actually you applying for schools, nobody will see it. Is
this a new law?
Yes, it is. This actually was enacted in 2014. So there are still, nuances to the law that are being, I guess, fitted out or determined. But it has been very beneficial to the clients that we have and the ones that call us every day.
Okay, thank you very much.
My name is Richard Jaffe. I am the senior partner in the Birmingham, Alabama law firm of Jaffe, Hanle, Whisonant, and Knight. I have been practicing law in the criminal and civil courts in Alabama and across the nation for over 40 years. I've represented thousands of people involved in the civil and criminal justice systems. I would like to invite you to watch and be a part of a new and unique